My name is Musinguzi, Micah Musinguzi. I was born in Kampala, Uganda, 1978. The time I was born, it was a period of war during that time when, as many of you know, General Idi Amin was the person ruling the country. So my dad used to work before for the government, the previous government, and during that time he was told that he needed to get his family out of Uganda because the general was going to do harm to us. So we had to flee to neighboring Kenya, where we stayed there as refugees for a couple of years until 1986, when there was a change of government, and eventually we moved back. But during that time, the country was still not that stable because the nation was going through a lot of political changes, a lot of political leaders, even after 1978. But when we got back, they had promised my dad to restore him a job back in the government, which he did. They did. And I remember before he was posted to his first posting in Libya, the war broke out between the president who was there was Tito Okello, and with the current president Yoweri Kaguta Museveni. So it lasted, I think, for a month. My experience in that situation, I remember I was 5 years old, and we were at school. And I just went to see like some flame of fire going right across to the mountain there, and I was like, what is this, and all of a sudden there was a blast and all that, so I knew something was going on. So the school bell rang non-stop, and there was so much chaos. I'd never seen such chaos in my life that time when I was a kid. So everybody was running here and there. I remember I was trying to look for my brother and all that kind of thing, and eventually we located him, and then they told us the soldiers are coming. We had to run and go home. It was around midday, so we had to run from all our schools, wherever it was. Cars were going in different directions and things like that, until they told us by 6 a.m. there was going to be a curfew, no one get out. And sure enough, the curfew began there. So midnight is when it all began, with the shootings and everything. We were warned not to stay in our beds because, of course, the bullets would be going through the walls and every other thing. So my family and I had to lay our beds on the floor just to be secure. And we were staying with an uncle, a cousin of ours, who, when we did come back home that evening, he fled. I think it was for the former government. He fled and left a lot of food supplies. Of course, the stores were all closed and every other thing, so there was no access to food and anything. But because this gentleman had access to that stuff, there was enough food supplies that we needed for the time the war was in. So for that, at least it was a month or so, we couldn't get out, of course. There was a lot of shooting and bombing and everything. We were only tuned to BBC Radio to get the full gist of what was going on there. Went to college in India. That's where I realized I had a call for God to serve there. So I joined a ministry called Victory Fellowship Ministry. Before I left Uganda to go to India, I remember my life was going on a spiral downhill because I'd kind of like compromised my stand with wrong friends and wrong company. Found myself indulging into alcohol and booze and stuff like that. And I remember there was a time the Holy Spirit convicted my mom, and she came and talked to me and told me, you have to change. You have to change your ways. And that conviction was strong for me. I remember going to my room, kneeling down, praying to God to change everything about me. So I had to leave all my old ways, all the alcohol and everything, the old friends. And that's when I surrendered my life to God fully. I remember there was one evening I'd come from work, and my mom, she's a woman of prayer, always seeking God and praying. So one time the Holy Spirit gave her a message, and she wrote it down in the form of a letter. And it was an appointment letter for my dad. And then she told me when I came back home that I have a feeling that your dad is going to a country abroad, and it looks like it's in North America, United States there. So she wrote an extract letter from the Foreign Affairs Office by faith, being that this is the appointment letter that is going to be the one given to him to go to the United States. And I remember when I was in India, I dreamt God, because God usually speaks to me a lot in dreams. So he spoke to me, and I remember I'd never been abroad to any Western country, but I particularly dreamt about a place that had a lot of pine trees, like Christmas trees and all that. And there's so many trees in this place there. So I didn't understand, and then I asked God, what is the meaning of that? Is this a place I'm going to go to or something? But I just did not get the meaning of it. But I kept the dream at that. And I remember telling my cousin, I think the Lord is going to be taking me to a place where there's a lot of trees. And this was still in India before I'd gone to Uganda. So we said, we'll pray about it. And me and him and I, we prayed about it, and we left it at that. That was a long time ago, and I forgot about that dream. But when my mom showed me that letter, the extract letter she had, the letter she wrote by faith, I said, maybe it's coming to place. And sure enough, one of the evenings, my dad came home with a letter from the Foreign Affairs Ministry inviting him or asking him or appointing him to go and serve in the embassy in Washington, D.C. So we compared the letter my dad had and the letter my mom had, and were almost exactly the same. So it was a faith journey that she took, and it came to pass. So eventually he left. Usually he was supposed to start and then eventually bring over his family. So he left and took my mom with her because this is immediate, of course, the spouse. So he wanted to bring me across to the place. I've never been to the United States, of course. I'd never been to the United States, and usually those who know the immigration process there is quite tedious. But once God has set you to go to a place, He's in charge of everything. So my testimony and how I got the visa, I remember I had my documentation and I went to the embassy that time. I prayed and fasted that one day, and I said, Lord, if it's your will, let it be done. When I leave this place, I will go and we'll see if that visa will come in. So usually what happens is it's a day's interview, and if you don't meet the criteria of going to the United States, you're told there and then, denied, and sent back home right away. So I went to the embassy in Kansanga, that's in Kampala, and my turn came in, and I was in that interview office there, waiting for my turn coming in. Now there were two immigration officers who were there. One seemed a little stricter, one seemed a little bit less strict. So I was praying that God take me to the one who is less strict, so we could see how it goes in. And sure enough, God did that. He took me there. She asked me the usual questions that I needed. I gave all the information to meet the criteria. And she, during the process of the interview, she asked me, did you actually, before you started this whole process, did you pay money for your visa? I told her, yes, I think that's the criteria that's needed for, I think it was $100, every person coming to the United States. She says, before you leave, make sure you go back and pick up your money and keep it. You don't need to pay money. I was like, okay, miracle one. I thanked God for that. So she asked me everything that I needed, and she said that at the end of it all, she said, usually I don't do this, but I just need one more document from you. Go back, bring your passport here and birth certificate. Come back with your passport and birth certificate. Come back tomorrow, and you'll get your final answer from there. So I was like, okay. I left, and I remember when I went back to meet other family members, they said, what's the story? He said, come back tomorrow, it's pending. So as soon as I went there, presented everything, I prayed again the night before, and sure it was. I got the visa to the United States of America, to Washington, D.C., and eventually had to resign my job and come in to Washington, D.C. So I remember my dad met a certain Nigerian pastor. He was having a church in Laurel, Maryland, and he told me about that church. And I said, why don't I get a chance and go visit there? And this is my first time in the United States. I'd never used the train. I'd never used the bus system. I never could understand I never understood the US dollar. But I said, God, I'm going to take myself to that place. It was, I think, around 45 or so minutes by train to go there. So I asked the Holy Spirit guide me and direct me to maneuver myself from Washington, D.C. to Laurel, Maryland, which I did, and eventually found myself to that church there. They welcomed me, and eventually they asked me to be part of them, and I joined, and I became part of the ministry, especially the praise and worship there, and then also the outreach too. During that time, I met a gentleman from St. Lucia, I think one of those islands. It was called Kisun, a very nice gentleman. And I was interested in what he was doing. He told me he had, of course, a cleaning business that did air duct cleaning and all that. But on top of that, another thing that touched my heart, what he told me, was that he had an outreach ministry of where he would go to the streets of Washington, D.C. and give food to the homeless and reach out to them. So that caught my heart, because this is something I used to do when I was in India, not necessarily giving the food, but just reaching out to people. So I said, sure, I would want to be part of it. But I told him, I'm just new to the country. I have no experience in this place. I haven't yet settled down everything that's required in terms of work and all that. So this gentleman said, oh, no problem, brother. You come, let's work with me. And he employed me, and gave me a lifting hand and brought me into his company. So when I came in there, I worked for him for the time I was there. He was such a good man. He paid me whatever he paid me. But above all, what we did on Saturday nights, I think it used to be Wednesday nights and Friday nights, we would go down to the homeless ministries in Washington, D.C. on the streets and give out food. So I told him we should do better than that, not just on the food. Let's bring in some people, brethren, also from other churches, not only to give food, but also to reach out the gospel. So it started reaching a moment where we invited churches and people to come out and start praying for people. And a lot of their stories were touching, Some people migrated from different parts of the world and they found themselves homeless in the streets of Washington, D.C. It really touched my heart, and we kept on praying for them, reaching out. Some gave their lives to Christ, some did not, but we believe the seed that was sown was such a strong seed. I spent my years in the U.S. for 10 years. Eventually, what happened is my dad's posting came to an end, and the government of Uganda was supposed to decide where else he was supposed to go after his posting. Usually the country tells you to go back home to your country of origin, and then they make a decision of where you're supposed to go to. So I remember that time we prayed with my mom and the rest of the family and asked God, what is the next direction you have for my dad? Then what happened is that God did something so miraculous there. My dad one time in the evening came and said that my boss seems to have been sent somewhere else, because all of them were supposed to be sent somewhere else. His boss was sent to Ethiopia, and him happened to be sent to Ottawa. So I said, Ottawa, where is Ottawa? Ottawa happens to be in Canada. So I said, oh, okay. So that's how my dad eventually ended up here in Ottawa, Canada. So he came, as usual, he came first, and then my mom eventually came through. And I remember when I was in the United States, I dreamt about something also. Like I said earlier on, God speaks to me in dreams and visions. I dreamt about a certain leaf, a maple leaf. And this place I saw had it looked like fall, and there were so many leaves on the ground. And there were actually maple leaves. So I was like, what is this place? I don't understand. Am I going to a place where it's maple leaves? I just didn't know, so I left the dream at that there. So eventually my dad came up here, and eventually with my mom. I was in the United States, and I was still asking God, what is it you have for me? He showed me this dream about the place of maple leaves. There's not that many, of course, in the United States. There are some of them, but not that many. But where is it you want me to go? How do you want me to get to this place there? So it's from this time, during the time when President Obama was getting inaugurated. Before that, when my dad came up here, we kind of met he met a family of a Kerry, a lady called Phyllis, yeah, and her daughter. They became very good family friends of us. And through that, I got to know a lady called Leah Olive, and we kept on being in touch and communicating. Our friendship developed and became strong enough until eventually after a couple of years, within maybe a space of 5 years, we decided that I think we have known each other for quite a while. We should take this to another level there. Sure enough, we decided to have a meeting before. We used to correspond on phone and everything, but for the very first time during the time of Obama's inauguration, she did come with her mom to Washington, D.C., and that was the first time I met this lady called Leah Olive. And we got to know each other, and afterwards we kept our friendship going on when she eventually moved to Canada. It was maybe after 3 or 4 years after that meeting, as we're corresponding, that I felt in my heart that I have known this lady for a while. She's a very strong, good Christian woman, and I feel she's the woman who's meant for my life. I want to engage her to be my wife. And I remember there was a day I'd gone on a vacation to Colorado to visit my friend, and she had gone to Uganda. And she called me when I was in Colorado. I just finished a prayer session that time, just looking at the beautiful Rocky Mountains. I was asking God to speak to me. And then that's when she called me, and she told me that I believe we should have our relationship to a higher level. And I told her, that's fine. Let me get back to Maryland, and you get back to Canada, and we'll go through all that. So as soon as that did come back, she came, and we did get engaged, and eventually got married afterwards. So when we did get married, I needed to move up. We needed to decide which place we're going to be, whether in the United States or Canada, to start our home. So I remember Leah told me that that time she had applied for a job in Texas, Houston, and she had so much faith that the Lord had wanted her to move to Texas, and we started a family there. And we prayed about it, everything with me and my wife. We always bring it in prayer. When we did pray about it, it was like I felt in my spirit God had not given us a breakthrough for Texas. So I didn't want to tell her. But I said, Lord, speak to her and explain it in clear terms there. So eventually when she saw the letter from the company in Texas that she didn't get a job, it kind of crushed her spirit, but I said that God will make a way and that something greater is going to happen. So I told her now the process of me coming up here to Canada, first of all, everything will happen just at the timing we didn't expect. I mean, how can I say that God is a God of on time? We had applied for every documentation for me to come here, but it was being stretched out. It took a while there. And we did not know when they were going to be, or how soon they're going to be done. And our child was due to come in by July 30th. So it was like we did not know what to do that time. So my wife told me that time that the Holy Spirit had told her that your husband is going to be with you, taking you to the hospital to have your first child. But I said, at this situation, it's a little bit impossible because we do not have the required documents for me to come to Canada. But we said we're going to have faith and trust God. And I remember a friend of hers even told her that you have to go talk to your nearest MP to see if they can quicken the process, to see if it will come that way. And I remember she brought that idea to me, and I said, no. God, who started this place, this whole process, will accomplish it, because the word says that he who begins a good work will be faithful to accomplish it. So I remember I was working, and then she called me at work, and she told me, Moses, I have good news. Your documentation has arrived. Wind up your stay in the United States within 1 week and get ready to move to Ottawa. I was like, wow, that's a short time. At workplace, you need 2 weeks notice. But I said, you know what? I think this is an answer that we've been calling for, because I wanted to be there right on the time when our first child was going to be born. And sure enough, I had to do whatever I needed to do, sell off everything I needed to do, and wind up my stay. And she came over and brought my documentation, and we migrated, and we came here. And when I came to Ottawa, McDonald's airport, she still had the fears that will everything go through, everything be in place and all that. It's a little bit too soon. But in my heart, when I was in the immigration area, I just had the Holy Spirit say that you have come home. This is home to you. So don't worry about it. So I went through the process, and everything went out without an issue, and were released to come to Ottawa. And that's how I migrated here to Canada. And as soon as we got here, the next day we were shopping for the baby stuff, and the next day, the day after, we went, and our first daughter was born. So that's how pretty much my journey to Canada came in. And I remember before migrating to Canada, I prayed to God and asked him, Lord, if it's your will for me to move to Canada from the United States, please show me a sign. One, to make every process easy, and may you establish me in this land that I'm going to, because I'm making a complete change from where I've been in for the last 10 years to go into a new land there. May you show me which area to go, how it's going to be. And sure enough, by that whole process, him bringing me before our first child was born, our daughter, was just a sign that yes, he had meant for me to be here. So during that time, of course, now it's been now 10 years, around 10 years, because I count the time when my daughter was born. I've seen really how God has been faithful to me during this last 10 years. And now just to bring a reminder to you, the dream that I dreamt. I remember the first day I was walking around here in the streets of Ottawa, and it was a fall season. And I was walking, and I came across a leaf there, and I picked it up, and I showed it to my wife, and I asked her, what kind of leaf is this? She told me it's a maple leaf. And I told her, this is the very leaf that I was dreaming about, that the Lord showed me, that I was going to be in a land where there's so many of these leaves. And it just shows how faithful God is. Whenever he speaks to you, he'll always direct you in whatever way you'd be. Sometimes it doesn't make sense the very first time he's saying it to you, but as you go along the way, it's eventually going to clarify itself. Eventually, he's going to clarify everything to you clearly. Yeah. I'll tell you first of all how I started the business too, if that's okay. I remember 2 years ago we went back after COVID to Africa, and we hadn't been there for a long time. And then when we came back, things were a little bit tight at work and everything, so we were like, we need some kind of source of income to supplement my regular job. So I remember sitting there, and then my wife told me, what is it you have in your hands? What skills do you have in your hands? You're very good at cleaning and arranging stuff. Why don't you use that to start a business? It was out of the kitchen table that that business idea came in. Flexicare detailing and cleaning came in. And she told me, you can actually do this. I expand it in both ways. You're very good at cleaning houses. Why don't you try doing vehicles? So I remember I thought about it and said, yeah, why not? And it's from there where that business started. I invited a friend of mine, my first business partner, to come in. And we started the whole thing. And it's been booming. It's been moving for, of course, quite a while now. When my business partner did not want to continue with me, I remember getting crushed about it, and I was kind of disappointed because I had big dreams about the business. But I said I cannot do it by myself. But I remember that time when he had told me that he was no longer going to do this. I wanted to close the business down and just give up on it. I went to God in prayer, and God told me that, no, I gave you this idea. I'm going to see it through. You continue doing it, and I'll bring every help that you need. So it's from there on, I kept on doing it pretty much by myself. Of course, the cleaning and the detailing and everything. And then eventually, I started praying to God. I was like, I need help. I definitely need help. I can't do this all by myself. Then he started bringing the idea that we have new people coming into the country. They are looking for opportunities to be blessed financially. So I remembered that. I said that when I just come in the United States, I was just like one of these new people looking for an opportunity to get into the land. And this gentleman, Lekram, helped me and employed me. So I figured, why don't I do the same thing? And it's from there I started bringing in a few people. And of course, currently, I do have a team that's from the new immigrants who are actually helping build this business up.